from the BBC World Service in association with ABC and All India Radio. This is Stumped.
Hello and welcome to Stumped, your intercontinental hit of news, features and debate from the quirky world of cricket. I'm Alison Mitchell and I'm in Adelaide between test matches at the moment. And that's meant that I've had a chance to do a little bit of bushwalking, do some wildlife spotting. It's actually part of the Alison Trail, which is some stretch of 1,200 kilometres, goes all the way from the south coast of South Australia, all the way up into the Flinders Ranges. I only did a teeny bit of it up to the top of Mount Lofty Summit, which is on the outskirts of Adelaide City itself today. But plenty of wildlife, kangaroos, an echidna, Jim, that's basically like an Australian hedgehog, and even a lizard, which I think was a shingleback lizard, I learnt afterwards. A little bit slow moving, a bit like me in the mornings sometimes, but very beautiful all the same.
Hi, Jim Maxwell from Sydney. I'm somewhere between test matches in Sydney, going to Brisbane and hoping that South Africa turn up and play some strong cricket because, my goodness, we need it after two seriously one-sided test matches so far. But it's the pinnacle of the game. And we're expecting South Africa, who haven't lost a series here for some time, to turn up and give Australia a challenge.
I hope that happens. Hello, everybody. This is Charu Sharma. Glad to be back on Stumped. I've just reached New Delhi and I'm at a friend's place, Vikram Yadav, who leads our cricket team. Because tomorrow we're going to play some alumni cricket once again up north. This is a public school alumni tournament between Mayo College, my school, and the Doon School, Scindia and Daly. So it's like a really fun event that I look forward to. And I'm actually skipping my Pro Kabaddi League final, which happens this weekend, to play this alumni tournament. I must be nuts. But and just before that, I was doing some tennis. There's a tennis Premier League, very exciting event, a short format event and so on and so forth. I've been out for quite a while, but it's great to be back on Stumped. And so much cricket going on, and therefore, so much to talk about.
But it is good to see you, Charu, because you have been everywhere, but we're very pleased that you're able to drop into us again. And there has been so much test cricket going on, hasn't there? So we thought we would take the chance at the start of the programme here to really have a bit of a dive into all those matches going on and ask ourselves, who should be the most confident test team going into 2023, and maybe who out of those playing at the moment should be the most worried about the fortunes of their side. So, Jim, you and I have been watching Australia, top of the Test Championship table, and they're about to take on South Africa, as you mentioned, for a three-match series. So off the back of the West Indies, this is really the main course of the summer, isn't it now, for Australian cricket?
It is. It's interesting to look at those behind Australia in the rankings. South Africa, too. It's hard to believe that Sri Lanka are 3. And then you would think on any sort of form recently that it'd be India and England who'd be vying for the playoff against Australia, but sounds like England have still got to do as much as India to make sure of getting there. So yes, it's a bit like that, unfortunately. It just doesn't seem to sink in with current form that a run of rankings down to England at 5 and Pakistan 6.
Let's just take a moment to talk about England in particular, because they are down at 5th in the World Test Championship table behind Sri Lanka and India, as we've mentioned. But they have won 8 of their last Test matches, including a series win over Pakistan. It is too late to charge for them, Charu, isn't it? But the difference in 12 months from when they were being beaten soundly in Australia is just staggering.
It's a very strange flip-flop. I don't see how and why they lost the matches they did about a year ago, but the kind of style they're playing now, the aggression, and of course the bowling, is just top of the world. So the series in Pakistan, because it's happening so close to us, is something we watched very closely. And all I can say is we've got to compliment Pakistan as well for staying with England almost all the way. They lost the second one very narrowly. And the first one too, despite all those millions of runs being scored, Pakistan did come back. So it's been a very absorbing series. And somehow England, perhaps more because of their bowling really rather than their batting, both sides have batted reasonably well, have really shown the world that even on these tracks, they can come up with these magic deliveries. So it's been a wonderful series. And I just wonder, we're talking about the World Test Championships, whether England has an outside chance of making the final, because they are playing, to my mind, the best cricket among all the countries in terms of red ball right now.
Long may it continue, because what they did in the first test, scoring at 6 and over, was just extraordinary. You can't believe that they could sustain that. and they've carried it on or tried to in the next test. But as you say, they've had the ammo to back them up. A nice varied attack, pace, reverse swing. Mark Wood contributing, even Jack Leach getting wickets, and then Joe Root as well. So they've got a nice little balance there at the moment. And Bairstow must be looking and thinking, well, how am I going to get into this team with this bloke Harry Brook bashing it all over the ground? So it's very exciting, I think, and it all points to an Ashes series, the like of which we may have never have seen before in prospect. So just put it this way, if Australia play anyone else but England in the final of that championship and happen to win it, then it just adds a bit more momentum to the expectation for England in an Ashes series taking on the world champions. I just thought I'd throw that in. It just should.
And they've got to have a good crack at actually winning the Ashes, winning them back on home soil is the challenge for England. What about
a challenge for Australia, remembering they have not won an Ashes series in England since 2001. So there's a fair bit going when we get to June this year.
They keep managing to retain that urn, don't they? Well, they did last time round anyway. And I have to say as well, it's been really wonderful following the English journalists on social media, because they had a chance to get out and about in Multan and indeed in Rawalpindi as well. But yeah, just seeing the tour being embraced, that was the Pakistan that I remembered back from 2005 when I was on that tour, and the ability to wander around and just absorb it, and the colour on the streets and the sounds and the smells and the noises. It's just been some wonderful footage and vision that we've been watching through social media. Now, Jim, you were getting a bit ahead of yourself talking about Australia going over to England for the Ashes, because they've got a pretty big tour coming up before then. Charu, I'll come to you first, because Australia, after this 3-test series against South Africa, embark on the small matter of a 4-test match series in India in February and March. So how much of a challenge is this going to be for Pat Cummins and his Australian side?
Well, I do think quite massive. I mean, they are playing fabulous cricket, no doubt, but it's not easy to win in India for most teams. And I do think it's going to be a fabulous contest, as much as I suppose the Ashes in terms of quality. India are going through a bit of a rough patch right now in just about every department of the game, certainly not starting out well with the bat, which is a pity. They've lost a couple of their bowlers temporarily because of injury. So I've got to admit that at this point of time, India seem a little more vulnerable, but they're always very strong at home, aren't they? And it depends on what kind of pitches and where they play. But the India-Australia contests are now, you might want to throw England into the mix, but this is the apex contest. And when it happens in Australia and India win, it's fabulous. When Australia come to India, if they should win, it'll be fabulous, because India, like most teams, are very, very strong at home. And yes, we look greatly forward to the contests. It's just that maybe the India-Australia contest will get the crowds back. But in India, my belief is that test matches are just a notch lower than they were in terms of attention, say, even 5 years ago.
Really?
So I hope that Australia, when they come in here and the media, amongst others, throw the whole contest up and there's this churn, that the crowds and the attention returns to test match cricket, because as you know, there's so much white ball cricket going on, so much attention there as well, that we know Kohli is for red ball cricket. I hope everybody else in India also rises to the occasion and to watch the best in the world.
Arjun Tendulkar is at the very start of his first-class career, but he scored a century on his first-class debut, the 23-year-old son, of course, of the legendary Sachin Tendulkar. So that was 100 playing for Goa in the Ranji Trophy. Charu, so I mean, I imagine that got a fair amount of headlines, didn't it, in India?
Well, it's like nobody else has got any runs at all except for Arjun. No, good for him, because, imagine the cross that he's bearing. I mean, it's ridiculous. And I watched him before. There was a Mumbai T20 league, and he's been sort of on the periphery for quite a while, and which is why, of course, he shifted from Mumbai to Goa to get a better shot at getting a few games. So it's fabulous. And I can't imagine how proud Sachin would be feeling right now. It's not a cheap team, by the way. I mean, he got his 100 against Rajasthan, which is a pretty strong team, generally speaking. Of course, everybody's forgotten that the guy he had a big partnership with, Prabhu Desai, got 200 odd. But it's all about Arjun getting the 100, and I'm really happy for him because he's a nice guy. Of course, he's primarily a left-arm quickie.
Yeah.
So the run getting is sort of
Yeah.
almost, well, I'm not saying incidental. I'm sure you want to be called an all-rounder, but it's like a massive monkey off his back, isn't it? And that's his debut match. It's taken time for him to play a Ranji Trophy match, but in a debut match, you get 100, you match your father. Oh, the celebrations in the Tendulkar home must be fabulous.
Very exciting and rather sort of romantic almost news that was.
From the BBC World Service, this is Stumped on ABC and All India Radio.
Now, let's talk a bit of women's cricket because the Women's T20 World Cup starts in February. And there are two series going on now, which are attracting quite a lot of attention, not least India versus Australia. And 47,000 fans flocked to Mumbai to see the second T20 International end with a super over. So never mind men's test cricket not attracting crowd. The women are attracting very big numbers. And Australia being the number one side in the world in women's cricket right now, they've just won 21 matches in a row. So it was always going to take something rather special to beat them. And so step up India's Devika Vaidya, after 8 years out of the T20 side as well for India. She hit a 4 off the last ball of the normal match in the 20 overs to level the scores and therefore send the game into a super over. And well, that crowd just seemed absolutely wild for it. Then we saw Rishi Ghosh, player of the match, Smriti Mandana, smash sixes off Heather Graham, who was making her debut for Australia in that super over. They made 20 runs off the 6 balls, and in response, Australia only managed 16. And so there was the victory for India. But I mean, Charu, what a spectacle that was. I mean, Australia did come back to win the third match, but holding their nerve to beat the world number one team in this sort of pressure situation, is that going to bode well for this elusive World Cup trophy in February?
Well, it's about time. I mean, India have been so close, the Indian women, that is so close, so long now, and it just hasn't happened for them. But you could argue that there was home advantage, and of course, when that volume of crowd gets behind you, a near full stadium of the D.Y. Patil, which is on the outskirts of Mumbai, then, what better in terms of motivation? It was an extraordinary match, no doubt about it. Got plenty of media here in India. I'm sure it's going to be replayed several times as well. But it was a pity, therefore, that they went down by a reasonably big margin at the Brabant Stadium, the CCI, the next match around. And you might notice that even the number of spectators was a lot less than the D.Y. Patil. I mean, India is trying to now open the gates and women were allowed free and so on and so forth. But still, you have to make a lot of time. It's never easy getting around in India to actually go to the ground and watch. So I do think the crowds were the most special part. Of course, it's top opposition playing Australia. Any win for any team over Australia anytime is fantastic. So if they can just somehow keep the rest of the series close, or at least the matches close, I think it'll garner a lot more attention. So at this point of time in India, yes, winning is important, but getting more attention towards women's cricket is perhaps even more important in the larger scheme of things, which seems to be happening.
Yeah, but they need a coach, Charu, don't they? They've got an interim coach at the moment, Rishikesh Kantekar. Can he make a realistic impact?
Kanetkar. But he's been in the coaching firmament for quite a while now. But to have anything on a temporary basis is a bit of a problem. In fact, strangely enough, W.E. Raman, who was the Indian women's coach, was commentating on the match, and he was there doing all the interviews and stuff. So he must be wondering, why am I not back here as a women's coach? So I don't know what ails the appointment of a permanent coach, because they've had plenty of time to think. And even though Kanetkar is a pretty, hard-boiled coach, and maybe just appoint him for the longer, unless there's a process that they need to get to. So I just think it's a little disrespectful to not have a permanent coach and a permanent set of support staff for the Indian women's team, because I don't know whether women just will take a little longer to get used to somebody new because the coaches have skipped around for a while, or whether it doesn't really matter, whoever is our coach, we're going to play the way we are, because Harmanpreet Kaur obviously has taken fairly strong control of the team. Now, I've always said that the higher the quality of a team in that the major international team, the best players in the world, how much can a coach influence them anyway? Maybe 3 to 5%. But with the women's game still growing, if I can use that term, still maturing, maybe the need for a permanent coach is that much more important for the women than it is for the men. So yes, they need a little bit of help there. Kanetkar is a fine guy, but whoever it is needs to be appointed on a more long-term, more sustainable basis so that everybody gets used to each other.
it does make me think, I just wonder if that's the crowd that you can get for a T20. I know it wasn't as big for the later match, but you just wonder what the women's IPL will do for the women's game. It should be the most significant evolutionary step in the game's history for its potential to pay the players the sorts of sums that former players would never, ever have imagined, and to where the game could go commercially. But it comes back to that point of investing in it in order to then raise it upwards.
Yeah, its time has come. I mean, it's been a long time coming. We've been talking about it on Stumped for years now about when it's likely to happen. I'm so glad that it is scheduled for March. Although, mind you, there's still all sorts of little question marks because the teams haven't been announced yet. I think there's a tender out for team ownership. And then, of course, there's a player distribution mechanism, perhaps an auction or whatever else. All that still has to be planned. And you're wanting to begin on the 3rd of March. So that's a little myopic because everything needs time to be organized really well. But I suppose the BCCI will put it off. Great news, of course, to have that happen. I'm not so sure about the commercial circles just yet. We'll see as time goes on in terms of the amount of money that needs to be spent on players or the player purse and so on and so forth. But whatever the situation, the important thing was for it to start. And can you imagine the excitement among the women cricketers of India? Because now it's like the men situation was, say, 15 years ago. It's not just the top 15, 18, 20 women who are going to be in the limelight. It's going to be exploding to about 100 or more. And it couldn't be better news for women's cricket in India, about the women's IPL itself in terms of its viewership and ratings and commercial circles. All that we'll see. But the first step is always the most difficult. And that apparently, or according to what we all know, has been taken.
Yeah, it is happening. Opportunity knocks. Well, that's all we've got time for on this week's Stumped on All India Radio. Don't forget you can follow us on Twitter. We're at BBCWS Sport. Use the hashtag BBC Stumped. And check us out on YouTube as well. Go to the BBC World Service's YouTube channel. My thanks to Charu Sharma and Jim Maxwell, and to you for listening. See you again next week. Bye-bye.
Stumped is a BBC sport production for the BBC World Service, in association with the Australian Broadcasting Corporation and All India Radio.